but we can't paint over rust, but we try to. And most people paint over rust, and you have to scrape that rust off. You have to get to the bare metal. It's time consuming. It's hard. This is hard. The hardest thing a person can do is look at themselves.
All right, welcome back to Hard Reset. Super excited about today's episode. Obviously, Tracy is here, and to go super personal, I brought in my therapist.
Our therapist.
Well, first he was like, mainly he's like, hey, I need to see you, but let me meet the wife.
And then once he met you, he was like, I need to see her too.
Yeah. But mainly he's my therapist, I would say.
Okay.
But Ed Clark, thank you so much for joining us today on Hard Reset. Super excited that you're here.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to kind of give a quick intro on who Ed is, just so everyone kind of knows a little bit about Ed. So Ed is, like I mentioned before, he is my therapist. He received his master's degree in professional counseling from Liberty University and holds a bachelor degree in criminal justice. Used to be a police officer, right?
Yes,
Some
correct.
great stories from that.
Unbelievable stories.
Great stories.
In addition, he is also a certified clinical alcohol and drug counselor, which is where I come in, and also certified trauma professional, which is also where I come in. He began his counseling career work as a program coordinator with an independent living program for at-risk use in Atlanta. Ed has a passion for helping people that are struggling with substance abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, sexual brokenness, couples therapy, family issues, depression, and anxiety. He takes a holistic approach to helping his clients. He's never prescribed me any sort of medicine.
No.
It's very holistic, which I love. His approach to helping his clients by working closely with them to identify underlying issues, causes, past events, and dysfunctional beliefs. Ed is married and has 2 children. He takes great joy in spending quality time with his family. Ed is not fluff.
He'll shoot it to you straight, which so many therapists are fluff.
Yeah, if you want to see someone that's just going to give you attaboys, Ed's not your guy. But Ed is not here to tell you what you want to hear. He's not here to agree with you. He will not tell you everything will be okay. He is here to provide honest, real, and authentic feedback. Through my conversations with Ed, I've learned to look through all the different window panes of life. I've learned how to be a better husband and father, a better leader, to be a better communicator, to be more confident, to be more patient and kind, and how to share love and grace to all God's people. Ed has personally helped heal and rekindle the brokenness of many of my friends and their severed marriages. Ladies and gentlemen, my man, Ed Clark.
I love it. My man.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So true.
Yeah, I wrote that. That was not AI writing that. That was a little bit of copy.
I don't know, man.
It's a little bit of copy and paste from your website. But obviously, we've spoken a lot in the past, and I do believe that God had a lot to do with my story. But I also think navigating that story through your holistic approach has really helped me as a husband and as a father, and I'm grateful for you. And I wanted you to be here today to kind of walk us through hard resets.
In general, yeah.
In general.
It's a privilege to have you here. I feel like people should be paying just to listen to this podcast. The knowledge that you have is actually unbelievable.
Thank you.
And you said that, you knew that God was in your story as you changed and that Ed's holistic approach, but I believe that God placed Ed right at the beginning of your story, of your hard reset.
Yeah. Shout out to Katie Newman who introduced us.
That's where it started.
Yeah.
Katie Newman.
Yep.
Katie Newman. Yeah.
Yeah.
And has passed along his name, so many times. I should count.
One day we'll count.
Sometimes it went well and sometimes it didn't, but keep giving your name out.
Yeah. So you see all different types of patients.
Clients. Is that the term you use?
Clients.
Clients.
Yes. From adolescents to, I would imagine, grandparents.
Well, it's really teens.
Okay.
So from 14 and up. Because once you start getting, to the younger adolescent kids, that's a whole different type of therapy in itself. So you're dealing with play therapy in essence, and so on. And so let me just deal with the teens and up.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I deal with.
You don't have a lot of toys in your office for play therapy.
No,
Not your style.
No, the only thing I have is like a little tennis ball that I
Yeah.
use as a teaching tool.
Right. We've used that tennis ball. He'll have to
Yeah, he's thrown it to me a couple times.
reactions.
A couple of times. That's right.
And a whiteboard.
Oh my gosh.
The whiteboard.
The white, because when you talk to someone, that's just one mode of communication.
Right.
But when you put things on the board and you put their life and words on the board and things like that, it's something else to look at the path and look at a dynamic as opposed to just talking about the
Right.
dynamic. So I try to use as many forms of communication as possible for change, for people to reset
Yeah.
in their life.
Yeah. And I have vivid memories of those images on the whiteboard. So they not only is it just you're hearing it and seeing it, but a visual allow you to remember it more too.
There you go. There you go.
And wouldn't you say that like males more generally are focused on a visual? Like it would help. I know it helps all people, but would you say that the visual whiteboard would help males more than it does females, or does it even matter?
I think males tend to be more visual. I believe so. It just depends. It depends on the individual. Sometimes when you present something visually and then you put emotion to it, or you accent certain things about it, and somebody now they're able to see it as something tangible as opposed just to some nebulous concept out of a conversation.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
It does.
Yeah.
Tracy and I always joked because when we would come in after someone would leave, the whiteboard would not have been whitewashed.
Right, but there's never a name on it.
Yeah.
Ever. You always only used initials, but we'd always try to figure out on the whiteboard.
You do you?
By we,
Oh.
she means her. Like I would not, and this is probably I would like not want to see.
Oh, no, I was studying the
someone's
whiteboard.
personal.
Well, you don't know who it is. There's no names
Well,
on
we
there.
think they just left.
I don't know who they are. You just get to see their whiteboard story. And you also get to see, once you've been to Ed, 20, 30, 40 sessions, you get to know what I know that whiteboard. I got that one. I've seen that before. How you view yourself, how the world views you. Yep, done that.
But you know what's interesting is that I will have a diagram or something on the whiteboard. And again, no initials or anything like
Right.
that. And I will leave it there. And then when that client leaves, another client comes in. And when they look at that board, you see now they start to relate to what's on
Speaks
that
to 'em.
board.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So it takes us down another road with them.
Yeah. See, you should have been looking at it the whole time. It was a part of a strategy.
Are you saying that I've been to Ed like 20 or 40 times?
I don't know.
I don't think it's been that many.
Combined.
Come on, Tracy. I mean, man.
Remember during the pandemic, we were doing Zooms. We couldn't even go a week.
I know.
I
It
know we
was
were doing
like
Zooms. So
at one point.
With you were very, one thing, Martin and Tracy, you guys were very open. You were very receptive. And again, and that's probably one of the most important aspects of therapy is just stay open. I'm not here to try to convince you of anything. A therapist should never be, in my opinion, trying to convince you of certain things. All the therapist should be doing is presenting you their perception of what they're seeing. You see what I'm saying? And if, truth is truth. It's going to not just make sense, but it's going to line up with other aspects of your life.
yeah.
And so that's what I really emphasize and I try to get people to do, especially when they first come in, and so just stay open. I don't want you to buy into what I'm saying. I just want you to stay open and just let, there's going to be truth and things are going to connect. It's going to make sense, or you're going to hear the very thing I'm saying from someone else. And then the word talks about, two or more people speaking the same thing. And there's most likely it's going to be truth in those things.
Would you say that a majority of your clients come in and they're there because they want to be there, or they just went through something, or someone has basically said you need to go talk to someone?
I would probably say 70%. I'm guesstimating, but probably about 70% of my clients, they know something's wrong, and they have to do something. They're recognizing situations, events, and relationships around them that are problematic and it's creating trouble and stress and struggles for them. So they take the initiative to come in. The other 30%, more people see that they're struggling and encourage them to come in.
But I've learned recently from a referral that I sent Ed recently, they said, Ed told us we weren't ready. And that made me think, it reminded me of that when you said you had to be open. And you would send someone away, or not send them away, but say, hey, I don't know if you're ready yet, if you're not open to change or accepting.
Yeah, because to have a spouse or a couple, and there are a lot of times where I have a couple, and one of the spouses aren't receptive. They're just not ready.
Self-aware. They're not self-aware to know that they, one of them.
They're self-aware. They're just very, they're resistant to it. And, one of the things I do is that, I don't just send them away and say, get out of here,
Right.
But I would encourage them just to think about, the session, what we've talked about, and staying open, and I'm here, and I'm here. But I can understand why you're resistant, If somebody struggles, their coping is a means of trying to survive the struggle. And it's hard just to say, okay, just stop it.
Yeah.
You can't just tell somebody just to stop something.
The coping skill. Yeah.
That's probably what they've used for many years.
Being like, what would be an example of a coping skill?
Coping skill would be if someone is, let's say, if they are a people pleaser, and that's called fawning, where you're just telling people what they want to hear, just to avoid conflict. You see, that would be a coping mechanism that that started when you were younger, much younger. And then what happens is that oftentimes we start off with psychological coping mechanisms from childhood as we get into adolescent, teen years, and then we start to go into substances to also add to that psychological coping. Does that make sense? So you can have multiple layers of coping behaviors and a mindset, and it really retards the mindset. It keeps that person from developing. And so now they're in their 20s and 30s but they really have a mindset or an emotional age of a teenager. And they can be 25 or older. And so it's just important for people to recognize there's a lot more to you than what you think. A hell of a lot more.
You say coping skills, and I immediately think of substances.
Yeah, alcohol, tobacco,
addiction.
and you threw a curveball, which is what I love about having conversations with you, because I immediately, organically that conversation is like, someone that smokes or drinks or whatever.
Even shopping or porn or whatever it is are usually the coping skills. But to think about psychological coping skills, I've never even considered that.
So are you saying that fawning brings on
substances?
Yeah, the substances.
How does that you said, childhood is more psychological coping because they don't necessarily have access to alcohol.
Right.
How does that transition look as they get older? Are you saying it transitions into substances?
I wish I had a
We need a whiteboard.
When an adult hits reset, hits a very major struggle. what that struggle is that it is a culmination, a domino effect of what happened earlier at a younger age. Okay. And so there are 4 things that slow emotional growth. Okay. So we grow physically and we grow emotionally. Okay. Now physically, if you're on earth, you're going to grow at a constant pace, consistent pace. A 4-year-old looks like a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old looks like another 8-year-old, so on and so forth. Our emotional development is not the same. It is situationally dependent. Okay. So as you are, let's say in a healthy household, as you are developing, you have support and family and so on, you are staying in childhood. Okay. So you're developing both physically and emotionally, and you're having parents and family helping you work through or keeping trauma and addictions away from you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But in unhealthy homes, every home is unhealthy on some level.
To some degree, yes.
To some degree. Okay. There are 4 particular things that can take a child out of childhood or slow or retard their emotional development. Now, physically, they're still growing, but emotionally, they are slowing down or stunted in their growth. There are 4 things. It is abuse, whether it is physical, sexual, emotional abuse. It is, oh man, I should have had the board.
It's okay.
I have a whiteboard. I'm sure we could figure out a way to get it in here.
It's so roomy. We could just cram in one more thing.
So it's like this.
Yeah, just right on the shingles.
So 4, you said 4.
Yeah, there are 4.
Okay, so we have abuse.
We have abuse.
Stunt emotional growth is what you're saying.
Things that will stunt a child's emotional growth, take them out of childhood. Abuse, divorce, injury or illness to themselves or to a
family.
close family, a parent. Because if you look at those St. Jude commercials, I mean, you talk about young kids, but they're very articulate.
Yeah.
You know, so they're dealing with a life-threatening illness. And so they can't play with the other kids and so on and so forth. And then the other is relatively new. It's over the last 25, 30 years is devices.
Oh.
So like laptops and streaming and phones and all this other stuff, because kids don't engage with other kids. What they're doing is they're entertaining themselves.
Right.
They're not engaging or encountering. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that'll stunt your emotional
That
growth.
will stunt your emotional growth.
Because you don't have to argue with the technology and learn how to work things out or learn how to share or compromise that you would most children learn how to do.
That's right. Because when I was younger, you know, we went out to play, and the only time the signal to come back home was when the street lights came on.
Yeah.
But now, you know, you got kids that stay in the house all day long.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, so I love leading into this question of like growing up as a kid, like what did you think your life was going to look like after these 4 things that are very influential in your life events that happen in your adolescence show up as a 40-year-old male, right? So when we ask this question to people growing up, what did you think your life was going to look like? Do most people live their current life in a childlike perspective?
That was multiple questions. So maybe even what your childhood was like, and then also what you see in clients.
You know, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I remember when I was 4. And there was my parents fought, and I could hear it in their bedroom. And my mother came out of the bedroom, and she had blood on her face. Okay, and I, as a 4-year-old,
Wow,
roughly around that, no more than 5, I felt it was almost like a detachment occur. Now, at the time, I didn't think anything of it, but as I was getting older, I didn't notice until later on, but I would only allow relationships to come only so close.
With anybody or just females or her?
With anybody,
Okay.
but particularly with females.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I was very guarded. And so in relationships and, I had wonderful young ladies and dating and so on. But as in any relationship, they want intimacy or closeness. And I was like, no. I was like, this is what you see. I had one relationship where, she was really, yelling and getting upset and so on. And because we weren't close because I was guarded and I had no idea. And she had lived with me. And that didn't last long because I handed her at the time a Yellow Pages. And I said, you got 3 days to move out. And she was gone in 2. And I didn't look back. But when I met my wife and was dating my wife, something was going on, and I remember, for the police department, I saw someone, they had, counselors.
Oh,
and
they
so
provided counseling. Okay.
Yeah. So I saw a counselor, and it was like maybe 1 or 2 sessions, but she asked me a very important question. She said, "How was your childhood?" I said, "Oh, it was great. Oh, no problem. Parents were wonderful." She said, "Huh, really?"
That's the worst when we hear that from our therapist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she did the same. She said, She said, but she wanted me to explore that.
Yeah.
And I did. And, my parents divorced when I was 13 and so on, but there were issues in the relationship up until then. Now, like any, family, we had good times and so on and so forth. I'm the youngest of 4 boys. So, but I think it was that event that detached me from relationships. And you see how that started to manifest itself later on in other relationships.
Right.
Okay?
Just that one-time event.
Just that one-time event.
And you didn't even know you were detaching at the time, nor
No.
did you know that was what was affecting you in future relationships.
No. But this therapist kind of, and all she did was, I went, a couple of times, no big deal. But to me, it was no big deal. But it was significant because she asked me to really look at my childhood. And I did. I started really reflecting on, really thinking about that. And talked to my wife some. Well, she was my dating, and so yeah. And so you see, it doesn't have to be a huge event. It could be little events here and there. You see what I'm saying? That were significant enough when you're younger to take you out of childhood for a moment, to put you into a different mindset, and that could be enough to mustard seed to now create a problem.
Which is stunting that emotional growth as a child.
Yes, it slows down that development, and so you're still physically developing and growing, but emotionally you're slowing down. And so imagine encountering something when you're 10 to 12, say, and now you're slowed down. So now let's say you're 18, but your emotional development is like a 15-year-old. Well, you're still in the same stage of life.
Doesn't
but
show up as much. It's not as obvious.
It's not as obvious, but it's there.
Yeah.
But again, you have to have parents or someone who is aware of you, having that connection. And if you have parents or a family that doesn't have that connection, you're not going to have that reset. You're going to continue developing in a what's called a dissonance, a cognitive dissonance. You're going to be developing in a abnormal way, if you will. Physically, you're growing. You're still engaged in adult responsibilities and relationships, but you are emotionally not able to do that. You're not able to emotionally understand or empathize or self-reflect or gain insight. And so now the issues become more and more problematic. And so this is where alcohol and substances start to come in order to add to your psychological defenses, your psychological coping mechanism. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So when the guests we've had on the Hard Reset podcast, some resets are by choice and some are you're forced into it either by the law or by a spouse or by health reasons.
Yeah.
And it just clicked to me when you said that. It's like when it's by choice, it's almost the people that have the self-reflection or the parent or the support. Would you say it's true that those people are choosing to reset? Like you noticing in your young adulthood that you had a detachment and then you dealing with that, you were creating that reset yourself because you wanted that change. Is that true? Am I understanding that correctly?
No, you are.
Okay.
God is a God of relationship. And I mean, because of his just wisdom and wonderment and so on, and it makes perfect sense because it was someone else's ability to recognize my issue that helped me recognize my issue.
Right. Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So there are two issues going on. There is internal drive to solve, to recognize your issue.
Yep. Being open to it.
Being open to it. Now, there's some people who have a very weak internal sense of self. They don't have that ability to really see the impact of the problems that they're having. And so now it has to become situationally driven.
Okay.
So their external world becomes so problematic and such a struggle that now they are forced to recognize something is wrong.
Okay.
You know, I would rather have internal drive.
Yeah, that's what I was
say,
thinking.
well, something's
Me
wrong.
too.
Than to get to the point where now
Yeah.
situationally, man, this is really a big issue.
Yeah. What do you notice about the clients you have that do have that internal drive or that internal, it's almost like their emotional intelligence or they're open. What do you see a trend in clients that are willing to make that change versus forced to by their environment?
Individuals who have a stronger internal drive, they have a greater sense of awareness.
Okay.
But they self-reflect and
Okay.
so on. So they tend to be more emotionally mature.
Okay.
So what do you mean by self-reflect? Like to the common person that's never been in therapy before, like what does that actually look like?
Self-reflect is one of the first methods God has given us in order to resolve our issues. Self-reflection is when you intentionally put attention onto yourself. You are intentionally not focused on what other people think. Instead, you're focused on what you think. You're not focused on what others believe, but then you're asking yourself, what do I believe? Why do I feel the way I feel? You're asking yourself questions, and you're looking for the answer
Within yourself.
You know, and so that is so. As you are self-reflecting, you see, in essence, it starts to create self-awareness, which is God's second phase of healing. So as you start to self-reflect, you start to gain self-awareness. From self-awareness, you start to gain insight. You start to put pieces together. You start to see a dynamic forming. From insight, you start to gain understanding. Understanding is a form of knowing. You're now understanding what the issue is. You're understanding that you are in a reset phase.
Yeah.
That you're in that you're in a stage where I have to decide, I have to compare, I have to make a decision. Okay.
I'm smiling because it's coming back to me, all this that we've learned about the stages of being self-aware, but then we always would strive to get to that level of understanding when we'd come to Ed's office with either personal issues or problematic in our marriage or with in a relationship, even outside of marriage, that with friends or family, that walking through those steps, and it was always the goal to get to understanding. It just reminds me of, it just is impactful to me because we start with just not even being self-aware it's
Or
a
the
process.
ability to reflect.
Or to admit, like to look within and admit that.
So much, and maybe this is probably how I was raised, but so much of like, especially early on in our marriage, like I always wanted to be right and win the argument.
Yes.
That is not understanding.
Yeah, that's not understanding. But it's like when we would get in arguments, it would be, well, someone needs to win in the argument. And we've worked a lot on my defensiveness because I become defensive because of, I'm sure, something that happened as a kid where I just feel like I need to defend myself
Right.
instead of self-reflecting and then becoming aware of, hey, you don't have to be right. It's actually even more manly to be like, you're right. I'm sorry for what I did.
And I think we've learned with Ed sessions that it's not about who's right. It's the why behind the way we feel. Why am I being defensive? Why am I even upset about that? Why is he upset about that? How is he hearing that? How is that, where is that coming from? And that's when we were able to finally get to work through that self-awareness, but then also start to understand, I think is what you're saying, is to start to understand ourselves and even each other.
Yes. When we live in a culture that is very reactive, very superficial. This is why social media, people, they see someone's life and they compare themselves instantly and so on and so forth. And this is the thing, is that when you understand yourself, you don't have to be right.
Wait, let's think about that for a second.
Yeah.
When you understand yourself, you don't have to be right.
You don't have to be right. In other words, it's okay. It's okay if that person accepts what you're saying or doesn't accept what you're saying. It's
You're still okay.
You're still okay. In therapy, I am not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. And I use this analogy a lot. Not everybody likes tomatoes, but does it make tomatoes bad? People will walk past the tomato aisle and so on. It doesn't make tomatoes not essential, not important.
Yeah.
And so as if you're in a reset stage of life, what that is saying is, it is saying that something is wrong. That is not a bad thing. It doesn't feel good.
Right.
But that is not a bad thing, what is happening. What is bad is to pretend it's not happening or to cover it up or to minimize
Push it down. Cope. Cover it up. Yeah.
There it is. That's the child part. All your child wants to do is survive. It doesn't want to resolve issues. It doesn't want to address issues. It just wants to survive the issue. This is what turns pain into suffering. Okay? And so when people are at that point of resetting their life, what it is that they're trying to, they have a pain, and they've had a pain for many years that started to manifest into suffering. You see where I'm going at with it?
Right.
Okay.
Because they're not dealing with it. They don't have that self-awareness, that internal drive. They probably don't even know the why behind it yet.
No. They just know how it feels, and they're just trying to avoid the feeling. You see.
Yeah.
And so I'm being very general.
Right.
But when I meet with clients, I mean, you guys know, we deal with very specifics, and we address those things because, again, when you dig deep enough and you're in it long enough, that's where you start to resolve things, and you bring things to the light of truth, to the light. If it is true, it is going to hold up to scrutiny. But in most cases, people believe stuff
That's not true.
that is not true.
Yeah.
I mean, how many genders are there?
2.
Yeah.
There are 2 genders.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're living in a pretty scientific, factual world with all this technology, and you still have people believing in that crap.
Yeah.
I mean, 200 years ago, if I drill, if you had a headache, I'd drill a hole in your head to let the evil spirits out. What's the difference?
Yeah.
So if people are willing to believe that today, then what makes a person you're listening to your podcast believe, well, I'm inadequate? Well, what makes that belief any different than believing in multiple genders or the world is flat?
Where does that belief come from? So these lies.
Yeah. Does everything stem from your childhood?
Childhood is that's why childhood has to be protected. When Florida, stopped these trans and gay drag queens.
You trying to take this political? Is this where we're going?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
But and it really is an example.
Yeah.
It's a mass example because if you think about, and again, I'm not I'm not transphobic and all this other stuff, but the reality is when they had these drag queens wanting to say stories or something like that to these 5-year-olds and so on.
Yeah.
What you were seeing was a form of grooming. You were seeing people believing something about themselves and wanting to be accepted.
Okay.
Okay. And so you see, you even have unhealthy beliefs being forced or passed on, and without a sense of self, without a means of self-reflection and asking yourself, well, wait a minute. Is this what I believe, or is this because it's popular, or because I can be accepted by this group or that group? And so I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to isolate a group of people or anything like that. But people struggle,
Yeah.
and when people struggle, people tend to gravitate to others who struggle
And accept them.
and accept them.
Which is why, like, the misfits, quote unquote, hang out with the misfits, like, all together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
And the popular kids want to hang out with the popular kids, and the nerds want to hang out with the nerds. Like,
It's where you're accepted. It's where you feel safest.
That's it. Let me know if you've ever heard of somebody who was struggling with meth hang out with alcoholics.
I'll let you know.
That's what I'm saying. Alcoholics hang out with alcoholics.
yeah.
Yeah.
The children play with children. Whether if you're a psychological child,
Right.
you're going to gravitate to people who accept you, and God wants us to understand our issues. He wants us to recognize what is going on, and He has that particular method of us being able to understand that we are in a phase of reset, that we are in a struggle.
Yeah. To listen to that.
To listen to that, to come to terms with that, and again, it is uncomfortable, and I get it. This is not an easy process, and I tell people this. And
Yeah. We've lived it. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Because it's permanent. People ask me, hey, I went to counselors and so on. I said, okay. Now, there's a difference between a counselor and a therapist.
Right.
And a lot of
people don't know that.
Some people don't know that.
Well, what is it?
Okay.
Use the flower. Use the flower analogy. Got to pull it from the root. Isn't that the difference?
Well,
Not there. Okay. Sorry.
Well,
I got my stories. I got my whiteboard stories mixed up.
well, a counselor, they tend to look at, again, it's very important. They tend to look at the issue, and here are some tools to be able to address that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Most counselors you see would be more in hospitals, in recovery centers, things like that. So there's not a lot of time.
Oh, okay. Strategies to deal with the symptom.
Yeah, they don't have the time necessarily to dig deep and,
Right.
and to really get into that one-on-one and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Where a therapist, it goes to the why of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Goes deeper.
And the roots.
Go to the root. There you go, girl.
That's where you said
There
it was
it
the
is.
flower. You go to the roots. The therapist pulls the issue by the roots, where the counseling, because they don't have as much time, they just pull off the leaves.
They pull off the
That's what you-
flower.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's so that you go,
You know.
into therapy, you got to get the root or it's going to keep blooming.
Yep. to
Yeah.
grow.
There you go. And again, counseling is good in those aspects because a person, they get a basic understanding when you're in a hospital or a recovery center and so on. And that's important. That's very essential. But you got to get to a certain therapist who is going to get you to reflect and get you to the root and to see those issues, because I'm after the big kahuna. That's the
Yeah.
root.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
pull a weed by the root, there is no
Yeah.
more
It's not
weed.
coming back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think I want to go personal with this question? Do you think that at the root of my therapy, that one of my biggest struggles, I mean, I had a lot of struggles, but one of my biggest struggles was, if you're okay, I'm okay.
Yes.
I heard, okay, so we use that all the time in our family because and the strategy of, which I think they're related, of I'm okay if you're okay, as a childlike behavior. And so I think we use it on a daily or weekly basis. Hey, stay the adult. Even when they're acting a child, you're okay, even though they're not okay. So will you speak into that? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no.
I think that's where you're going with it. But if you'll speak into that, because that is like every day we use that to maintain the people we interact with at work and out in the world, our kids, to remind yourself, stay the adult, even when they're the child.
Yes. Children obviously see the world and they don't have boundaries. So children are just very accepting. So children are okay. You become a mirror of that kid, and that kid becomes a mirror of you. So when kids walk up to each other on the playground, let's say we got a 5 or 6 year old, and again, I'm just, I'm being general.
Right.
But, and the kid sees another kid and that kid smiles and he smiles and, hey, you want to play? Yeah. And so now they're best friends.
Right.
There is no scrutiny or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the opposite is also true. When that kid is angry at that kid and that kid feels bad and so on, and then and then kids believe the kids don't have the ability necessarily to criticize others. They are more likely to criticize themselves. You see, so if you're mad at me, I must have did something wrong. If you're if you're unhappy, it must be my fault. You see what I'm saying? Okay. And so if you think about childhood, it's kind of like wet cement, And so the younger we are, the wetter the cement is, the easier it is to manipulate and draw into that cement. Now, if there are no parents around to help soothe out and smooth out that graffiti that was in that cement, then it starts to harden. And now that hardening and whatever that graffiti is, that becomes the belief. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when kids are like, if you're okay, I'm okay. Well, it's inappropriate as you get older.
Yeah.
It's just inappropriate. Do you believe in Santa Claus, Tracy?
I believe in the magic of Christmas, but not in Santa Claus.
So you don't believe in some overweight dude
No.
coming down?
I
into
try to
your
answer
channel?
that correctly. That's what I tell my kids. I believe in the magic of Christmas.
So you believe in Christmas? That's an adult,
right.
Because you're
Right.
saying you don't believe in magic,
Right.
But you're
Right.
believing in the
The
relate.
feeling, the Holy Spirit, the Christmas season, what it's about, Advent. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, but you don't believe in the actual,
Right.
Santa Claus and all that stuff. You see, and so that is an adult view of a season, whereas children believe in the fantasy of it.
Right.
Okay, and this is when you have an adult that sees the fantasy in things. So wow, so like if you have a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old and he's, I need people to accept me.
Okay.
Well, see, that's a child belief. Now, again, we all want to be accepted, but by the time you are an adult, you have to have a sense of self where, yes, I want to be accepted. I don't need to be accepted. Where children feel a need to be accepted in order to feel validated and I'm good. So it's more, it becomes more of a as we're younger, we feel as a need. As we get older, it becomes more of a want. It's an option. I like you, but I don't like you that much.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think a few things you've said have triggered thoughts in my mind as a mom who thinking about my girls as little girls and also now as teenagers. It feels like such a heavy weight to know that their cement is hardening if I'm not there to smooth it out, and that so much of their future and the truths they believe about themselves come from this stage of life. What advice or guidance do you give to those thoughts on we have so much power while our kids are still so moldable?
Again, it's important to understand parenting is critical.
So much pressure. It hurts. It's hard.
It's hard, but again, if you are an adult
Yeah.
and you're willing and you're responsible and you have a sense of self and so on, then you're willing to deal with the hardness of being a parent.
Yeah. Because it's worth it.
Because it's worth it. Is it difficult? Yes. And there's an old saying that, children sharpen their teeth on the bones of parents.
I haven't heard that, but it's so true.
Yeah, it's very true. But we have to be willing and we have to be honest, authentic, and real with ourselves as adults. Am I ready for parenting? Am I willing to be able to pour into my kids? Am I aware of my kids and how they're feeling about things? Am I engaged with them?
Communicating about those feelings.
Communicating about, not trying to take away their
feeling,
issue, but you're trying to get them to self-reflect and at first identify, hey, what are you struggling with? Hey, or hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
If you're not okay, that's okay not to be okay. Let's talk about it. Let's bring it up.
Yeah.
Let's have conversations and so on. The best thing that a parent can do for their kid, it's teach them a sense of self. That is the best thing because when you have a sense of self, when you have a kid who is okay with themselves, not perfect, but they're okay with themselves. They can look in a mirror and they genuinely like the person in the mirror. Oh my gosh. Everything else you can just add on.
Right. How do you get to that point? What does that look like to help facilitate that in a child?
Yeah, because so much of our life, it's like, oh, we see our kid by themselves, alone, devices,
It's like, how do we create that? How do we, right? Is that
How
what
do
you're
you
asking?
I mean,
It's
I have
so many
questions.
I know. Because we do try to teach our kids, and I think most people we engage with that are parents are trying to teach their kids to be okay with themselves and to be okay when someone else is not okay.
Now I'm gonna stop you. In
Okay.
something. Because parents tend to go into teaching mode.
I am guilty of that.
You see, and again, there are times to teach, but there are times just to interact. There are times just to be with them. You're not trying to teach them. You're not trying to school them on anything. You're not trying to impart wisdom all the time and all. And I'm guilty of that. I mean, as a therapist, my kids,
Yeah.
Dad, what are you going?
Yeah.
Wow, again, Dad,
The unsolicited advice.
Yeah, that I had to stop.
Yeah. You have to listen and let them fail and watch them fail.
There it is. But you want to let them know that, hey, I'm there for you.
When you're ready.
When you're ready, or because you want to build relationship with them before you plant seeds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I look at it as a road. You want the smoother, the wider the road is, the more trucks and message can cross that road so that they can be receptive to it.
Yeah.
But you got parents, man, they're trying to drive semi trucks, over trails.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
gotta
they have
smooth the road first.
You gotta
Yeah.
smooth the road. You got to have it has to be relational.
Yeah. Is that where you build that? Going back to a child has to look at the mirror and have that good self-image of themselves. How is that built, or how do we facilitate that?
Okay. Boys see who they will be in their dads. Okay.
Boys see who they will be in their dads.
And
okay.
dads look at their boys to see who they were. Okay. Daughters, the same. They see mom, and that's my example. That's who a woman is. That's feminine. And moms look at their daughters and say, wow, I was there. So it's a symbiotic connection,
Okay.
you see?
Yep.
And but the basic thing you're trying to do is let them know that, you are good who you are. You're okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a certain size.
Right.
You don't have to have certain grade level. But you're good who you are.
You just tell them that and show them that by how you react to their,
Yes, ma'am. How you engage with those with your kid.
those feelings and those thoughts and those grades and
Yeah, because when you're just spending time with them, they see there's no agenda. You're just spending time, and they're wanting to spend time.
Yeah.
And when you're spending time with them, just having fun, just enjoying the time, and so on, well, they can be who they are. They can be open, receptive, to what you have to say. So I would rather plant, a handful of mustard seeds periodically than to try to get a dump truck, onto concrete.
Yeah, but also as part of like being a parent is like you don't want them to make the same mistakes that you have made.
That is a conversation we have a lot. Okay, you're shifting your own childhood issues onto them. This is not a them issue. This is a you issue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
so hard, but it makes sense that you have to first. It starts with that smooth road. I like that analogy. It starts with that smooth road and where they want to they want to be with you, and they're open and receptive.
And a smooth, wide road is
Yeah.
what I took from that conversation. And the parents, and I have been that parent before, I know, where I have made a bicycle trail, and I'm planting,
A dump load.
a dump truck of wisdom.
And that's where having two parents is so helpful to know. So many times I'm like trying to teach them something, and Martin will say, you know what, that sucks. Middle school sucks. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but where's your heart? Let's talk about how you handled it. And, and that's not what they need. So it's good to have that balance.
there you go.
So
Yeah. you know, at the beginning you talked about 70% of your clients that come in are there on their own kind of accord, and then maybe 30% are there because like a spouse said, or you know, the
outside
authorities,
world,
the
yeah.
outside world.
Yeah.
Is it a good mix of people that actually take that and continue on the journey, or is it more like the 70% are going to continue to try to pull that weed, and the 30%, because someone asked them to be there, they're not really?
Are you saying that? Are you asking that this is it the 70%? Are they successful because they're ready to pull the issue by the weed? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Where and how much of that 30% does converts to?
Or just fall off and don't show up to therapy anymore?
You know, I would say that the 70%, they tend to move forward. Maybe I'd say maybe 65% tend to move forward in therapy. Let's say the 30% that are pushed into therapy by others, I would probably say the 30%, I would probably say maybe 80% may continue. You know,
That's pretty good.
Wow.
That's good, because they may not realize, like you were saying earlier, they may not realize how they were impacting others, or they may have had a preconceived idea what therapy was,
Right.
and so on, and they're staying open to it.
Right. Which I think you're so good at, which is why I keep sending people your way, especially marriages. Like, you're so good at making them see reality without being too pushy or too fluffy or too, I don't know. It's just so good at convincing them.
I never once felt like when I left, even though a lot of our marriage, you know, arguments or fights or whatever were probably stemmed because of me. I never felt like when we left, it was, Martin, you've got to do all this work on yourself. Tracy's right.
Yeah.
Like, I never left there. It was always like, hey, Tracy, do you think you could work this way?
Right.
Martin, do you think you could work this way?
Which is what you're so good at, making both parties believe that they have work to do and that it's worth it.
Yeah, it's rare that you're going to have an issue with a couple and it's just the spouse
Right.
alone.
Yeah.
It's just that's rare.
Because nobody's perfect.
No one's perfect, but there is a dynamic that goes on between a very dysfunctional spouse and a supportive dysfunctional spouse. You know, so I mean, you know,
That's so understand that.
yeah. So there's culpability in both,
Yeah.
in certain ways.
Yeah.
And that's what you're trying to understand. This is not pointing out and saying you're bad and you're good, and not at all, you know, but we're human. We're human beings, and we're trying to navigate a difficult thing called life. And we're trying to navigate life with other difficult people.
Dysfunctional.
Difficult ass people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just being honest.
man. That guy, my man.
You know, I mean, this struggle is real.
Yeah.
yeah.
This struggle is real.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever's listening and seeing this, you know, if they close their eyes, they are in either 3 stages of reset. They're either coming out, they're either going into a reset, or they're either currently in a struggle, a reset. And it is very important for your listeners and people watching this to, you know, to come to terms with that. This is a hard life. Life is hard. And life is impossible if you're not equipped. It just is.
Yeah.
You know, and God gave us relationships. He gave us a clear way of resolving issues, coming to understand that we're at a reset point. We're at that rock bottom
Right.
point, and there are options. There's clear ways of navigating it. you know, but we have to slow it down enough so that we go deeper and we're in it long enough to start seeing it for what it is.
Yeah. We conclude all of our Hard Reset podcast with a question. Looking back, is there anything you wish you had known or would have before the Hard Reset or had told yourself before? So my question to you is, what is something you would tell someone that is in one of those three stages? In it,
About to be.
yeah. So, like I said, the question we usually ask is, okay, you're through this hard reset. Looking back, what did you wish you had known? But I'm curious, from your point of view, what would you tell those people in each of those stages?
I would tell someone who is either coming out or in it or coming out, going in or in it, to slow down. I wish a lot in my life earlier, I wish someone had just told me to slow down. Self-reflect.
And the good and the bad, probably.
The good and the bad.
Yeah.
But we can't we can't paint over rust. But we try to, and most people paint over rust. You know, and you have to scrape that rust off. You have to get to the bare metal, and it's time consuming. It's hard. This is hard. The hardest thing a person can do is look at themselves.
Yeah. And they don't, it's hard. It's hard to be uncomfortable.
This is difficult. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I totally understand. But it is so worth it when
Yeah.
you can come through therapy
Yeah.
and you can look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I genuinely like that reflection. You come a long way. You come a long way.
We say that to people all the time. God's put some people in our path that have walked similar roads, or wives that are in a marriage that's hard. And I like to say that it is, I can relate. It is so hard, and it hurts,
Yes.
but it is worth it. And I'm here to tell you that there's hope on the other side, because I would do it all again for the marriage and the life that you have.
Yeah.
That we have
So-
now. So, if people wanted to get in touch with you, Ed, how would they go about tracking you down and getting your
tracking me down.
Yeah, I mean, you're not easy to find.
You will go to www.lifefocus.biz.
B-I-Z.
Yep.
Yes. Or, Ed at lifefocus.biz.
Is your email.
That's my email.
Send you an email. I think your phone number is even on there on your website.
All that's on there.
Yeah. Send them a text. And then if you want to mean business, then you better fill out the paperwork before you get an appointment.
And I love that about you is like, hey, you can come in, but you're not booking an appointment until you fill out this paperwork.
Yeah, you got to show the effort.
You got to show the effort.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm not going to do it for you.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. You this is your work.
Yeah.
This is your work.
I wanted to close with this question to you because it's been a great debate with a friend of mine who has also gone and seen you. And he seems to believe, and who knows, he seems to believe this golf story that you told him of your first time ever playing golf, that somebody was telling you about the swing and you made a hole in one, and like
A birdie.
like you had a birdie and you shot like under like whatever, and that may be true. My question to him was, what if he said, what if I went and played golf for the first time?
So you need some clarification
So I
for
just
this
want
friend.
for this one friend who
Tell
is
us about your golf
definitely
game.
watching right now.
Tell us about your golf game, your first golf game.
The first round of golf you ever
I
played,
ever played at Torrey Pines in La Jolla,
Okay.
California.
California. Never played before in my life.
This is
boy.
where you lost the client. They were like, this is BS. But go ahead.
Because golf is very hard.
Oh, yeah, it is. But I had no idea, I hit some, I think before we played, he told me some very basic, swings and grips and stuff like that and so on. And I didn't know how to score. I'm going on what he was doing, but he said I was doing great. Yeah, he showed me the guy he was in the Navy, and he somehow we were able to play. And he showed me how to swing, how to grip, and all that other stuff. And I just did it. I've always been an athletic person.
Sure.
So I was just very open to what he showed me. I didn't have anything else to compare.
Sure.
So we go out there, and I know I hit. Now looking back, it was a par 3.
Yeah.
And it was what is a birdie like?
2 under par.
A birdie is 1 under.
1 par.
1 under par.
Yeah. Okay.
At this point I can't remember exactly, but I know I had a birdie.
Yep.
On one of those.
Yep.
It might have been a par 5 or something like that. I know I hit a hole in one.
That's unbelievable.
So you hit a hole in one like on a par 3 where you one shot.
I can't remember exactly what.
Okay, because you're not a golfer.
I'm not.
Definitely wasn't then.
No, not at all. I mean, I just swung the hell out of that thing, and he looked, and he said, "Oh my God!" He said, "Is that a hole in one?" Okay, and so we went, and it was a hole in one. I think I did what is an eagle?
Eagle is like on a par 4, you would be, after you hit your drive, you hit your second shot.
So it's 2
in
under
the
par.
hole. But that's 2 under par, but you can also get a hole in one on a par 3, and you can get a hole in one on a par 4.
But an eagle is 2 less than par.
Yeah.
So if the par was a 5, you shot it in 3.
But if you hit it in, you typically using an iron.
He's getting all technical.
My man handed me the golf club, and he told me to hit over that way.
Yeah. And it went in the hole.
Went in the hole.
So you got a hole in one, an eagle,
Did
and
you
a
happen
birdie.
to see like 2 rounds? Like, were you in a perfectly manicured spot where you like would have to put a tee and a ball, or were you like?
Oh man,
you don't remember? Okay, well you heard it here first, live.
Okay.
yeah. So
Client walked out and never came back. He was like, I can't believe that story.
Yeah, I can't believe that story. Golf is so hard. He's probably never made a hole in one.
Yeah.
I was like, listen.
I probably couldn't repeat that to save my life.
Oh,
Yeah,
of course not.
yeah,
Of course
yeah.
not.
I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know professionals that I've never heard of a professional hitting a hole in one. Well, no, people have.
Yeah.
They call it a hole in one.
No, it happens a lot. Not often, but once every couple tournaments, there's live action hole in one. So
Well, if that's the case, then if somebody can do it, then why wouldn't I be able to do it?
no, that's a valid point. I just was kind of shocked because I hadn't heard that story.
Oh, so you need a clarification because
Yeah.
you had heard it. Okay, gotcha.
Because I said, like, what if, he said, what if I went out and played golf and got a hole in one and went to Torrey Pines and all those things?
I mean, the guy I was with, he said it was a hole in one.
Can we find that guy and he comment below so that my buddy can find him and go down that
Oh,
road?
man. Well, thank you for your time.
You
That
are
was
more than welcome.
wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this is going to help a lot of people.
Yep.
And super
Yeah.
excited and thankful for what you do for people.
Yeah. Stay in business. Keep sending you that way. Don't leave anytime soon.
Not a problem.
We end everything, all of our podcasts, with a high five. So,
High five.
my man.
Oh, man. and that was a high five, not a slap on the behind. No. For those who just audio.
Wow, thank you. First of all, thank you to Ed for just giving us his time. I know he's super busy. I can't emphasize enough, if you need someone to talk to, he's the guy. And I know he's helped all different people from all walks of life. And you can see, like, he's got this holistic approach where he's just going to go in and pull it at the root, right? Pull the issue at the root. And it is hard work. You do leave. I've had conversations with other people that are like, man, I don't know if I can go back. That was so hard, because it's difficult. But on the other side of it, it becomes a lot easier. I'm just grateful for his time. Obviously, we are a roofing company first. And so if you wouldn't mind telling that person that is saying, hey, I've got this roof issue, we would love to be the person that you call upon whether it's a roof repair, a roof wash, or even a new roofing system. We want to be those guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Can't wait to see you on the next one.